Let's talk about last night's episode of Masters of Sex. And I enjoyed this episode. We basically start off with Bill and Libby trying to reconnect after the tragic loss of their baby in the last episode. So they decide that they're going to go off to Florida and have a mini little vacation. But as we all know, Bill is never really there with his wife. He's always back at the office and he's always thinking about his study, or let's face it, he's thinking about Virginia. So Libby quickly realizes that his attention is not where it needs to be, and she dismisses him and sends him back home. So when Bill gets home, he basically goes to Virginia and says, I want to continue with study. Now, while Bill was gone, Virginia was up to some stuff herself. She had gone to listen to Freud's daughter speak, and she revealed some interesting facts, which were that women can receive orgasm without vaginal penetration, and that is through clitoris. And so, of course, Virginia questions her and says, have you guys done any studies to prove this? And in kind of a blushing way, she says, well, no, we haven't done any, we don't have any proof. And whoever would do this would basically be doing some lewd behaviors. So, chuckle, chuckle. Obviously, that's what Virginia and Bill are doing behind closed doors. So Virginia, of course, quickly enlists her friend Jane, and they start conducting some research of their own, and they decide that they're going to see whether, in fact, you can receive orgasm without vaginal penetration, and if you can do it just through stimulation of the clitoris. So, of course, we find out that that is true. And so it's a very interesting revelation because, Virginia's shocked by this. She's thinking that, wow, I didn't think that that was, that could be the case, and that you could have more pleasure from that. And so basically what they come up with is the fact that you don't need a man to please yourself at the end of the day. So you can get your job done all by your lonesome. So, it's kind of interesting that these women are having this revelation. And of course, Virginia makes a comment like, the day that women can have a better orgasm on their own and without the need of a man is a brave new world. So, it's interesting that that is the title of the episode, and that is basically what is revealed. So when she reveals this information to Bill, he's all like, I doubt it. And she's like, no, I'm telling you, this is what the chart shows, and I know how to read it, and this is what it is. And so she even mentions to him that, some women can have an orgasm just from having their breasts being touched and stuff like that. So, obviously they're wanting to explore all of these different types of way to receive orgasms, and that is one of the major reveals or research that is going to continue on throughout the series. Now, the other storyline that was going on was with Provost Scully, and at the top of the show, he basically goes to the gay, what is it, like the prostitute that he's been seeing, and asks him like point blank, have you told anybody about me? Does anybody know? Have you mentioned my name? And he's like, no, I've enjoyed having sex with you, and I've enjoyed you, and I don't want to ruin that, so no, I haven't told anybody. And of course, he's really reluctant to continue this, but eventually he kind of gives in. And then we actually we finally get a sense of his home life, and the fact that his wife, Margaret, has not been intimate with her husband in a very long time. And one of her girlfriends has admitted to her that she's actually doing this study, and that, nobody really reveals their names, that they all have like these case numbers, and it's basically anonymous, and they can go and they can do this. And she's basically saying she's never had this amount of pleasure before in her entire life. And of course, this piques Margaret's interest because obviously she's living with a man who's living a secret life, and he's actually gay or bisexual, but let's face it, he's gay. And, so she hasn't been pleasured in any sort of way since basically the birth of their daughter. And we find this out because she goes to Virginia and Bill and asks basically if she can be in the study. And so while they're asking her all these background questions, we find out that, they have had less than one sexual encounter in a year, her and her husband, and that what she believes may have been an orgasm, obviously wasn't. So she's, never had an orgasm in her life. And so, they basically tell her, unfortunately, we cannot admit you in the study because you need to have at least had an orgasm to be in the study. And it's a really sad scene because, she's like, well, I'm not sure if I've had one. And then Virginia very quickly says, well, you'd know if you've had it. So, her face sinks down and she just looks like a sad, sad woman. And she gets up and she quickly leaves the office and she just starts crying in the elevator, because, she's probably in her mid 40s and she's never had sex like properly. And it's sad. So, this, then we go back to her home life and we see like this very cold dinner between her daughter and her husband, and they're all sitting so far apart from each other. Like there's no intimacy at all. And he's like, listen, go to the movies, go have fun. I know you like watching movies on your own and I'll probably fall asleep in the first 10 minutes anyway. So go and enjoy. So she goes to the movies and then she ends up meeting up with Dr. Lingham. And he is the doctor who's been having issues with getting it up. And basically Jane says to him at the very beginning of the episode, listen, you have psychological issues when it comes to having sex at this point. And basically it's kind of like performance anxiety. So him and Margaret at the end of the film, they recognize one another and they start talking. And now this is where I felt like the episode kind of rushed a lot here. So Margaret is the wife of Provost and he's like the head of the hospital. And Dr. Lingham is like a doctor in the hospital. So would you think that they would just all of a sudden hook up like that easily? I wouldn't, but they do. So, they're taking this nice stroll. He's walking her to her car and she basically like they're having a good conversation and they're basically understanding one another. And then, she makes this offhand comment about how she's been crying throughout the whole movie. That's why she looks like this. He's like, you look like what? And so he's totally flirting with her. And then they kiss. And then next thing you know, they're having sex in the back of his car. And of course, she's going to have her first orgasm ever. And it's a scene where you're like, okay, great. She's liberated. She knows what it feels like now to have an orgasm. But I felt like the scene was totally rushed. And obviously, he no longer has performance anxiety, which is fine. But it just felt like that just came out of left field. Like, I don't even know if we've had an episode where we've seen the two of them have a conversation before where they might have been slightly flirting with one another. And so for it all of a sudden to come out of nowhere and then for them to just hook up like that felt kind of weird. But that aside, I was like, all right, fine, great. They both are able to overcome the issues that they've been having. Then we get now to the very end of the episode and well, actually, no, let me backtrack a little bit and go back to Libby, who basically stayed in Florida by herself and ended up hanging out with the people that were in the room next to them. And it turns out that they were like 70-year-olds who were like having sex like crazy. And this actually intrigued Bill when he was there because he was like, most people lose their sexual like excitement like in their 60s. So he was surprised that these two were going at it like almost 3 times a day. And so obviously he's curious as to how come they still have like the sexual libidos and they're so aroused by one another. So this obviously piques Bill's interest. And she ends up like talking to them, and it was really kind of sad because she lies to them and she tells them that her husband died, that she has 2 kids, and it's sort of like this weird way of her trying to enjoy her time there by really lying about her life. And that the storyline quickly unravels, and the husband tries to flirt with her and propositions to her to have sex, and she basically freaks out and is like, oh my god, no, I'm gonna call my husband. He's like, I thought your husband was dead. And so it was just like this really sad kind of storyline that was happening because obviously she's still dealing with the fact that she lost her child. Her husband is obviously not like sexually aroused by her. It's almost like the Madonna whore syndrome where, he looks at her like this prize and he doesn't want to like think of her in any kind of sexualized way. And so it's like, that relationship is totally doomed and I just want it to be over with, to be honest. So now we get to the end of the episode and, they've basically gone back to doing their studies and, Bill basically tells Virginia, listen, I don't want you to be my secretary anymore. And she's like, are you firing me again? He's like, no, I basically think of you as more than just a secretary, and I want you to be my researcher now. So you're going to have a new title. He's like, I'm not going to pay you more, but I'm basically stepping up your title because I don't want people to just look at you as a secretary. You're more than that. And he knows how good she is with the patients and how people respect her and stuff like that. So, and this stems back to an earlier conversation that he had with the doctor who's like, oh, she's a bit like, I'm a woman doctor, and I don't appreciate the fact that people are looking up to her as a secretary when I've had to work this hard, and I understand it. But lady, like, you know, it is what it is. Like, how about you sticking up with your other lady doctors or people who want to be doctors? And, you know, she's just basically like not impressed with Virginia Johnson at all. So Bill basically says, I want you to be my research assistant, and I'm kind of looking at you as a peer and no longer like you're beneath me kind of thing. And so, you know, there's all excited about like the new direction that they're going to be going in. She tells him about, you know, I talked to Jane and apparently she can have an orgasm from just somebody touching her breasts. And then she talks about somebody having an orgasm from putting a Q-tip in their ear and like all these weird things that seem to get people off. And then he's like, well, wow, I'm really going to have to find out if that is true about somebody touching your breast. So then all of a sudden, Virginia starts to strip down. She hops up on the table, starts putting the little prods on her, and he's looking at her in the mirror like, what? And then she says, we're scientists, right? We're doctors, kind of. Well, she's not really a doctor, but, you know, we should be able to test these theories out ourselves. So this whole time we've been building up to, will they, won't they? When will this happen? How's it going to happen? And boom, just like that, Virginia's like, boop, up on the bed, you know, top off. And she grabs his hand and puts it on her breast. And she's just like, let's go. It was kind of like, alrighty then. So, you know, I thought it could have led up a little bit more. But I guess if we're trying to say it's all about the science and not about the, you know, the emotional connection that the two of them have, which we already know they do, then fine. But it'll be interesting to see where this goes next week. So all in all, it was a pretty good episode. A couple of missteps here and there, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. So that is my review of Masters of Sex. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.